All right, welcome back, everybody, and good evening. It has been and will continue to be a very stressful week for me, so I'm not sure if I'm going to get to record a video during the weekend, but nonetheless, I wanted to bring you something a little bit different here. Usually, I always make playthroughs, and this time around, I just wanted to go over a deck list with you, and this is what I was brewing around during the week whenever I found time to play and to brew. And in the end, you see something that is very uncommon for me. I'm playing a list with 26 lands, but hear me out first. Um, the land base is compensating for lack of sweepers here entirely. We're running blue-white without any sweepers, which is very uncommon. But here I think Blast Zone does a phenomenal job to compensate for that. So overall, I'll go over this deck list and a couple of techs in here, and then I'll go through a couple of games individually that I played during the week and ended up 5-0 with this particular list. So, as I said, we can go down here. 26 lands, only 6 basic lands, which I think is the perfect number for any control deck. You usually don't need any more, and sometimes you will, of course, run out of basics, but at that point, you already have so many lands in hand or in play that you don't necessarily need any more. Then a Ghost Border in here, especially to fight Tron, but it's just also really facilitating to run out our opponent of basic lands. And Blast Zone. Blast Zone is the most recent addition. I've already tested it before, but I've put it back in because I didn't like it with sweepers because it just felt too redundant and you had too many dead matchups where you had, dead lands that were also colorless, and then you also had sweepers, so you just had so much air in your deck that you usually can't afford to play. So here I went with 2 blast zones. You could probably also go with 3 blast zones and only 1 ghost quarter, something like that. And you will be able, I put 2 houses in and 2 spell snares and 4 snapcaster mages to maximize our interaction potential on turns 1 and 2 and 3. And then after that, with the new Teferi especially, and then up the curve Jace and the other Teferi, and you have Search for Azcanta as well. It's just so much value. You're burying your opponent. Whenever you get anything down, basically you're burying your opponent. And for that reason, you're making your land drops, and then in the mid game you'll just sacrifice a couple of lands either for utility or to blow some up. And for the most part, you're yourself not blowing anything up of your our own planeswalkers and searches or whatever, because search for Scanta is flipping most of the time. Snapcaster Mage is not usually important, and you will commonly only blast for 1 or 2, but if necessary, you will also be able to go for 3, 4, or 5, whatever. And at that point, you mostly don't have any planeswalkers out. And if you kill one of your own planeswalkers, so be it, because the trade-off apparently is worth it. So then let's talk about Teferi here. Teferi, just a really, really good addition to the deck. Also makes Owls better, of course, makes Serum Visions better. Also a reason why I'm playing Serum Visions over Optier and no Terminus. Yeah, sometimes it's not a really good card, but you'll always get to draw a card. And it will occasionally also come up in even creature-based decks where I was playing against. You'll see it against Hate Beers, where, flashing in Restoration Angel is not possible anymore, or Path to Exile would be crucial because you're flashing in Nimble or Vendilion Click and blocking one of their creatures, which usually would have been protected. And so Teferi, just something that I can really recommend. And the rest of the deck is pretty stock. Well, not really, but partially at least. Then for the sideboard, just maximizing on Rest in Pieces and Stony Silence here for the most part, because that's just our backbone. We don't really have a whole lot of weaknesses with this deck. Like we can beat both control and mid-range and combo with the Dovin's Veto and Pact of Negation pretty easily. The only problem would be very aggressive decks. Burn is a huge problem. Also because you're a little bit slower with all these colorless sources. You are making up for it with the pure amount of value that you're generating mid and late game, but the first like 4 turns are really problematic to stay alive. So if your opponent's playing a whole bunch of, I don't know, 8-whack or whatever, then you're gonna be in trouble. What I want to say about Blast Zone is that I really think it's a great card to have in the format because it punishes people to overload on a particular converter mana cost. So if everybody's like Death Shadows playing on ones, you're not only getting punished by Chalice of the Void, but you're also now getting punished by Blast Zone, which you cannot discard effectively. So people really get another tool here, and that is just great. Dovin's Veto, as I said, is a little bit difficult to play with that mana cost, so I only bring it in slow matchups, either combo or where I really need the uncounterable clause against like Solid Reclamation or whatever, or control decks. And Pact of Negation is in here because in control matchups, with the mirrors, most of the time you go one, I don't know, clicks end of turn, then resolves his own Teferi, and then you have to get rid of their Teferi and bring your own Planeswalker down at some point. So Pact of Negation is a good backup plan there to just tap out, play something, and then win the counter war. Your opponent wants to play a Teferi or whatever, and you can pact it then, which is pretty great. Timely Reinforcements is just really important in general. It's good against all the really aggressive graveyard synergetic decks. I always bring it in against like Dredge and stuff in combination with Rest in Peace, but of course also in the very aggressive matchups like Burn and Eggwork. Timely Reinforcements just really good, and sometimes also against midrange. Yeah, so it could be 1 or 2 sweepers. I'm not saying the sideboard is perfect yet, but it fills most of the gaps. The Tension Sphere acting as a pseudo sweeper, although it will also mitigate the real cost on which we can blow up Blast Zone. So you don't want to go up to 3 then anymore, but that is somewhat self-speaking. So yeah, this is the 5-0 league that I played. Also played against a couple of good ones here with Chateau and Trophy Leaders and stuff. So yeah, the deck has shown its strength, and now I'll switch to the individual games here. Just bear with me. Alright, so we'll just have a look at this here. We're somewhere in the middle of the game, so someone apparently thought of a mono blue control deck, but he's also playing a lot of Field of Ruins and Blast Zones, and that makes a whole lot of sense with Thing in the Ice. So here it's really nice to have like an end of turn option to just blow things up and make our opponent have to act. And he's going for a Cryptic Command here in order to save his Thing in the Ice, which is totally fine by me. And then we have the time here to make a couple of plays and get ahead on the board and the build field, and yeah, then from there on it's pretty smooth sailing. We have a Cryptic Command up, we have Path to Exile as well, and here Blast Zone was really good. Yeah, so going forward, I still think that 26 lands might be a little bit too many. I also played against Death in Texas, Eldrazi in Texas in between, which was a pretty rough matchup because you always have to be able to respond to their stuff, otherwise you're just getting locked out by either Thalia or Leonin Arbiter or Thornot Seer, and they're almost bit me in the ass that I had so many lands. But as I said, with like one or two sweepers in the sideboard, that feels pretty good. Also, probably wouldn't play Nimble in here. Vanilla Click was just really good. And I would like to have another 3-drop, which also is convertible to a certain amount or to a certain degree. History of Benalia is interesting because we can also bounce it with Teferi, but only after the second mode, so one would have to bring them down quite at the same time, but probably interesting for standard. And yeah, that's it for today. I'll see to uploading another video quite soon, and see you around, guys.